Last Friday, we talked about the HTML5 version of Usign, and obviously it's not ready today. We told you that it would be a few weeks before that would be pushed out into your accounts. We would give you ample notice. You would be notified by email. You'd be notified in the group. You'll be notified in this webinar when that's ready to push out. But I think we're really, really close. And always hate to give a time frame because something weird can happen at the last minute. And that's the reason why most platforms today have kind of moved away from being able to give a roadmap with specific dates on it, because you can't always make those dates, and then people have a fall apart and don't understand that that's the way things work. Good morning, Kathy and Pete. Anybody else want to introduce themselves? Hi, good morning, good morning. So yes, on this lovely, and it is a very lovely Friday here in Alabama, we're going to do some random things today. I'm going to walk you through a whole bunch of stuff, things that have come up in previous webinars that I wasn't able to address at the time for one reason or the other, whatever that reason might be. Olu, good morning, and Daryl, good to see you, and Tony, welcome this morning. So I'm going to pick up some of those things that we've talked about previously, or questions that have come up, and I'm going to give you just a bunch of random things that I think will be helpful to you in in your design efforts and your design work. Okay? No, I don't. We don't use. Paul, we don't use this Friday webinar to talk about those partner platforms that other people that we may promote to our audience. But unless we're going to do a specific webinar about that, the answer to that question is no. I'm going to talk about something in general that may be relevant there, but no, we will not. We won't. We don't cover those partner platforms unless we dedicate a specific webinar and we let everybody know that that's what we're going to do. Okay, just so we have a clear understanding about that. Sihor, good to see you. Jack, good morning. Anyone else? Hopefully that'll answer your question, Paul, and with understanding that we want to make sure that we do these webinars so that they give the greatest value to the most people. That's kind of the commitment that we have. All right, any questions before we start? As I have said repeatedly, this is an interactive webinar, so your questions are important. I will do my very best to address those questions as we go. If the question and answer requires either that I look into something prior to being able to give you an explanation, or I have to have something ready in order to be able to give you a demonstration, I may have to put that off to another webinar. Or I may just do a brief video on it, put it in the group. It depends on what the need and necessity is. But your questions are extremely important, and so it is good for you to ask questions. I will try to keep track as we go. I don't have anyone helping me this morning. I don't usually have anyone helping me this morning, but I usually have some people like Pete and Art and Arnie and others that will help me remember things as we go. So let's see, who else did we have join us? Jack and Paul, and Jack and Lori have jumped on since the introductions a minute ago. So what I want to do today is hey, Eric, what I want to do today is I want to run through several questions that people have asked about, and I'm going to address how to fix some things that aren't on the platform, okay? The first thing that comes up frequently is people ask questions about sizes. And so I want to talk about the sizing. Let me make my screen a little bit smaller so it's easier for y'all to see and easier for me to see what's going on. All right, that should work. I think we'll be able to work. Can everybody see okay? Are you able to see? Sasso, good to see you. Is everybody able to see okay? All right, good. I want to talk about the presets that are. Yeah, Ralph, you'll have to address that with support. I don't have any, I don't do any support while we're doing the webinars live. They're a live webinar, and I don't have the ability to be able to address support issues. That is a specific user-only experience. And unless it applies to everybody on the webinar, it will not be easy for me to address that for you. But if you will send an email to support@useim.com, they'll be able to address that. Now, it is the weekend, so it may be a while before they can address that, but you might just try skipping past the Z Suite and go to useim.com. That's probably the only direction I can give you at this point in time. But if you'll take that to support, use the support channel, either the support email or the support button on the platform, that will help you. Now, you may not be able to access the platform, so you may have to use the email. Okay. All right. Several things that have been asked about sizes. And so I'm going to give you what I do from a size standpoint, and then we're going to talk about why sizes become important and how to maximize the use inside of Useim to be able to accomplish what you want to do. Okay. So the first thing to do is I have the custom size menu open over here. These are called presets, and these are things that are already preset at a specific size inside the platform. I'm going to give you let me copy this. We'll talk about it in just a second, but I'm going to drop this in here so everybody can click on that link. Now, don't be reading that. Follow along with me as we go. But I want you to have that open in your browser, because I shared that link with you, and that has some sizes for social media platforms. And then there's some things that I want to address about that. But these are all presets. And so if you open up the Useim platform with the presets, now I always start right here. I start with that size right there. And the reason why I do is because this size, 1200 pixels by 628 pixels, that size is the easiest to adjust, larger or smaller, and be able to still accomplish the purpose that I have in mind. Now, I'm going to show you how I arrived at that. When you go over here, and you'll see that is the Facebook ad medium. That is a rectangle, 1200 by 628. Excuse me. Over here, when you look at the Twitter post image, it's 1028 or 1024 by 512. 1024 by 512 is really close to 12 by 628. Okay, so I'm going to put something over here so you can see this. And this is a good exercise for you to do so you'll understand. Okay, I'm getting two messages. One says that there is no screen. The other says there's no sound. Can somebody let them know to use the F5 key and refresh their screen? Because it looks like other people are not having an issue. Is anyone else having an issue? Okay, good. All right, then what you'll have to do is, and somebody's let them know that use the F5 key to refresh, and that should make everything work well. Okay? All right, over here, when I select the Facebook and then I have Twitter, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put something over here in the corner so that this is easy to see. I'll make that a color that's easy to see, and I'll duplicate this. I'll move it over into this corner, and I'm going to duplicate this and move it up into this corner up here, and then I'm going to duplicate it and move it into this corner over here. All right, y'all see that? You say, Eric, you just stuck 4 boxes on the screen. Watch what happens next. I'm going to take this, and now I'm going to go to the Twitter size, and I'm going to do the Twitter post image. All right, now, do you see this? Watch what I can do here. I'll go back over here, do this. I'm going to capture all of this together. I'm going to save that as a group. Now I'm going to delete this. I'm going to change my size to this right here. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab that group. I'm going to insert that group here. Now I know exactly how close my corners are. Do you see that? So I know that if I had this at its original Facebook ad size over here, if I can adjust this so that I keep my pertinent areas, my most important things inside of that framework right there, I know that I'm going to be able to switch from Facebook to Twitter without changing anything. Did that make any sense to anybody? Do you understand what I'm saying? And you have to kind of play with the size. And then once you do, you go, well, that makes perfect sense. Then there's a whole bunch of them that fit in this area right here. I switched the video size. I'm not too far off from the video size. See if I can get all of this question. Yeah, Bob's saying that it works for me based upon the constraints across the platform, right? Yeah, you're going to have, when I switch to video, and I call it a splash page, not everybody calls it splash pages now, but you understand all I have to do in order to do this is select this corner right here, and I can make it like this, and I'm pretty close. And then I can select this corner like this, and I can do this, and I can make it pretty close. You understand what I'm saying? And I can go to YouTube, because the things I'm going to use the most are going to be Facebook, that ad size and the post size. I'm going to use Twitter, the post size. I'm going to use YouTube, and I'm going to use YouTube, the thumbnail size. And notice the thumbnail size for YouTube and video are the same. And so everything fits, and they're all really, really close to the preset sizes. Those four platforms are all really, really close to each other. Okay. Now, if I switch this to a header, the headers are significantly smaller, but this is a header that goes at the top of a web page, and it's significantly smaller. But if I go back to any of those things, a web banner is a little bit different too. But those are the things that I'm going to have. Now, Pinterest is completely different, is a completely different layout size, completely different. So that's another, I have to do something completely different if I'm going to use, any presets in Pinterest. I don't have anything I can start with, but I start with almost all of my designs. I start with this Facebook ad medium, and then I can begin to adjust and work from there. Yeah, Pinterest and Instagram are both completely different. Pinterest has created a new, I just explained, Henrik, I just explained that you'll have to do that. You'll have to send that in through support. I can't do that inside of, I don't do that in the webinar. I'm not here to forward things to support for anybody. How I copied the group page. That's a really great question. Right up here, I'm going to ungroup everything. I'm going to do it again. The way I did it was I just simply put my mouse up in the upper left-hand corner, held down my left mouse key, and pulled across here and grabbed those. Now it's going to grab the essential elements off of here because I don't have an image in the background. And then up here in this upper left-hand corner or upper right-hand corner of this menu, the toolbar menu over here, you'll see the group feature. Do you see that? You'll see this group feature. When I select group, it'll save it over here. When I do this, I select group, and then I have the universal icon for save that group. It's saved it over here into the group section under graphics in my left-hand menu. This is a very, very handy thing to do. this little grouping tool, and then you can just go back and delete your groups anytime that you want to. But that grouping tool is very beneficial. I'm going to show you a couple of other cool things with this in just a second. But but do you understand what I'm doing with my, and the reason why I don't have a background on here? Do you understand what I'm doing with my sizes for those things? Facebook, for Twitter, for YouTube. Do you see what we're doing for that? Now, the reason why I don't have a background on here, let me throw a background on here and you'll see what I'm talking about. Just going to put just this first background. This background right here, if I had this background, and I'm going to make it the background. If I had this background on and I had, switch over here, and I had 3 objects on here and I wanted to save them, and I did the same thing and I pulled my, see, I can't do that because it's grabbing the background. So when you group those things together, you want to group them together without the background. Now I can group them together like this. See? Does that make sense? So you lay out what you're going to put. You lay out what you're going to put on your different platforms. And I'm just using these boxes to lay them out. But you lay out what you're going to put on your various platforms, and then you save those as a group, and then you add a background. Yeah, you can shift select each one of them with the background in place, but the technique I just showed a minute ago, being able to drag across the images, you can't do if you have a background in place. But you are correct, Eric. You can select each one of those individually by holding down the Shift key and doing that. A little harder to do if you have a real complex image. All right, any questions about that? You understand what we're doing? Now, I'm going to take this one step further, and we're going to go back over here. I'm going to change this background here now. Once I've got this in place, I'm going to change the background. I'm going to add a background. And right up here, we have this, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Right up here, we have the ability to set that image as the background for this layout. This is more of a square image, and I'm putting in more of a rectangle size landscape shape. So I'm going to lose part of the dimension of this image, but I'm going to save its aspect ratio when I import it. So I'm going to set it as the background. I want you to pay careful attention to these areas right here when I set this as a background. And notice I've lost some of those areas because it's more of a square image going into a more of a rectangle landscape. Does that make sense to everybody? But it maintained the perfect aspect ratio, so the image itself is correct. All right, and you saw how I used the set as the background right here, because I can set that as the background. Now, if I wanted to test different backgrounds, what I would do is select a replace key right here. Notice how that has stayed the same color. You see it on the right-hand menu there. I've got the replace key. When you roll your mouse over the top of any icon in Usign, you will get the definition of what it is. In this case, it's the replace key. And so when that turns blue, then I know I've activated the replace key. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to replace this background image. Make sure I'm in the right spot. I'm going to replace this background image with this one. And notice how it made that background, that image become the background. Everybody follow that? Now, where this becomes really advantageous, that little replace key becomes advantageous, is in this case, yes, you have to click the replace icon first, and it will turn blue. When it turns blue, then you can select the image from over here. Make sure you have your integrations or your selection, what you want to select. Make sure you have that available in your left-hand menu before you click the replace key. So let's do something really cool here. We'll take these like this, and I'll adjust these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an image from over here, take this image right here, and I'm going to make this image right here so it fits inside of this container right here, like this. Okay? I actually need that with a background. I know what I can do. I really need that with the background. I was trying to find a rectangle image. That one happened to be handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background for this. I'm going to make this. Follow along with me here. I think you'll find this helpful. Let's do this. Can I crop that when I do that? All right, anyhow, I'm just trying to follow the questions as well. So if I want to reproduce this every time over here, I size it first, and then I hit my reproduce key, my duplicate key, and I have it right here. But what if I wanted to change those images? I'm trying to say each step as I'm doing them, but I don't know why you can't see it. I'm serious. I don't know why you can't see it, Robin. If you can help me to understand, I'll try to do that. Yeah, I'm not changing the shape of my cursor. I'm just not going to do that. You have to follow with me. All right, so I can duplicate these and make these exactly the same size. All right, but what if I wanted to use different images in here? What if I had a different intention and I wanted to use a different image in there? If I wanted to make each one of these a different image instead, how would I do that same thing? The replace key. I take this image. Now, it would have to be an image very similar to that, but I would take this image and we're going to replace it with this image. It's going to fit in the same size right here. I'm going to hit replace and do that. Now that fits. It's not going to be the same shape because it's not the same shape. But because I used the replace, I didn't make it that size, which is enormous. Hopefully you can see that. The replace key is an amazing tool. You can use it for all kinds of stuff, and you can use it to accomplish all kinds of things, particularly in this situation where you're trying to do something where you're replacing these objects in here with something else. So if I select this image in the middle and I hit the replace key over from the right-hand menu, and I replace it with one of these icons over here, it fits. When I click on the icon itself, you see how big it is. So this is a huge time saver to use that replace key. It can save you a lot of work and a lot of time. And obviously from the comments, not very many people have been using that. So it's something that I try to remind you of every once in a while to make sure that you get in the habit of using that, because you'll find it very helpful. Especially when you have several things that you want to do and you want them to be the same size. If I wanted to replace this image, again, I'm trying to put it inside of the constraints of this container. I use the replace key. I hit that. I replaced it with that icon image, and there you go. And you can reproduce those very, very quickly. Where that comes in real handy, and you've seen me do this in the past, is, let me get rid of some of this stuff here. If I have a, let me just do this. If I have, want to make a series of icons, let's go back up here, and I'm going to use the custom menu now. I'm going to use the custom size, and I'll make this 400 by 400. Now I have this. I'm going to turn that into a transparent background by selecting solid and hit the transparent button. Okay. No, there's no auto align for multiple images. That's why I freehand so much stuff. I just clicked on it and clicked the trash can, Eric. That's why I freehand so much stuff. I want to get the habit. For example, over here, it's a really good question. I try to illustrate this every once in a while. I want to get in the habit of being able to do this and duplicate this and have it like this, and then watch it with my eye so I can freehand it and get it the same size. See? I try to get in the habit of doing that, and it's kind of fun to do that. Robin, hang on just a second. I'm going to answer that question. I actually have the tab open to do that, okay? Yeah, I'm going to address that in just a second, Alex. I think I'm going to address what you said, okay? But that's the reason why I get in the habit of freehanding these so that I can practice that, and I can make them exactly the same size. See, it's amazing what you do when you practice something. All right, let me address some of the questions that have come up here. The first one is resizing the image. If I have an image that's 3,000 by 3,000, first thing to do is use the image resizer. We're going to talk about this one in just a minute. But this image was too big, and so I dropped the image in here and I resized it. And it is resizeimage.net. I'm going to drop that in the chat so you all will have that. But that's a great tool to use. You just simply use this slider right here. This image, actually, when I brought it in originally, let me do that so you can see why. When I imported this image originally, this was it. And it's 1400 by 1400. And where I'm going to use this is for my podcast. Where I'm going to use this in the podcast is, see if it'll let me log back in. A second here to log in. This is where that image shows up in the podcast. Okay. Now, I have this open because I want to show you that there's a lot of opportunity for you with Usign to be able to help people who are podcasting, who are bloggers, who have a variety of platforms, and they're going to need assets like this. And knowing about those assets is going to help. So if I go over here and I look at this list, okay, when I got ready to open this up, let's see, there it is. When I opened this up over here, I had an option to choose a new image. This is the size. It has to be between 1400 and 3000 pixels. So I made my design inside of Usign right here, 1400 by 1400. But when I imported it, it said it was too big. And so I opened it up to see how big it was. And it was 1 point. I don't know if you can see can you see my download screen that is available now? Can you see that? Because this is the other half of Robin's question. All right. The image when I imported it was 1.4 megabytes. Let me go back over here. There is a feature inside of this right here that allows me to be able to compress my image. So I hit the compress image, opens up this tab right here. I uploaded that image that was 1.4 megabytes. And see, it's uploaded the image. And it went from approximately 1.3, 1.4 megabytes to 404 kilobytes. And it compressed the image. Sometimes you need to make the images a smaller size. Sometimes you need to compress them so that you can use them on certain platforms. Did y'all follow that? I didn't change the size of the image because it needed to be 1400 by 1400. But at 1400 by 1400, it had too much stuff in it, so it needed to be compressed. So I used the Resize Image and compressed the image, and it opens up this screen. I inserted the image, kept the image quality at 90%, and compressed the image, and I went from 1.3 to 404. And if your websites are loading too slowly, and we talked about this during the whole branding experience, if your websites are loading too slowly, then you need to compress your images. I use platforms that auto compress the images, but not design platforms. I want my designs to be like they are, but I think it's important to compress your images. Now, because of the nature of this particular platform, they need this image to be as small as it can be while still being big. Understand that? The size has to be big. The size of the image has to be smaller. So while I was working this morning, getting ready for this webinar, I thought, hey, let's talk about this compression feature over here, because sometimes you need to resize the image. Sometimes you need to make the image smaller. And I was going to play with a bucket image this morning that I took with my phone. So let me upload the image. I took a picture of a bucket. And this is the picture of my bucket. I took it with my phone, imported it directly into my computer. Do you see how big this image is? 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. Do y'all see that? Yes, it is a part of the resize.net. That's a really big image, but that image was taken with my phone. And I tell you, your phone images are going to be huge. So if I took this image directly imported it into Usign, I wouldn't be able to open it in the background removal tool. Right? Because it's over 3,000 pixels wide. So I needed to resize it. I don't need it to be any more than about 1,500 pixels. So I can go over here and I can put that like in that range right there. That's 43% of the original dimensions of the image. Y'all understand that? So when I import it, let me take it from the uploads over here. I uploaded that image. Do I have it here, or did I? I might have deleted it. Let me upload it. My new compressed image. Let me get the upload started here. For some reason, it's not uploading. So you have the ability to be able to resize your image here, and also to be able to compress the size of the image. You maintain the shape, but you remove some of the stuff from the internal program of the image, okay? And that allows it to be able to fit inside of the dimensions that I needed for here. Because I couldn't import something that was over 1 megabyte, and that one was over 1 megabyte. When I reduced it, it was under 0.5 megabyte. All right, you understand that? Do you see what I mean about the podcasting being an opportunity? There's going to be a need. Let me show you. There's going to be a need. We'll go over here, because here's what you can do. All right, let me get something here. The website. That's what I want. I have a very, very plain website for the podcast, and it looks just like this. This is it right here, and it's very plain. It's very ordinary. But some of these are pretty elaborate. All right, and so you've got an opportunity to be able to help somebody to put the right kind of imagery for their brand that they want here, and that they want with each one of their pieces. Rob, you're gonna have to give me a little more clarity about that image quality question that you're asking there. When I do the compression, maybe your answer to the question, I use image quality at 90%. I just leave it at that. That's the default, and so I leave it there. I don't have any issues. You can see over here, this is what that looks like. This is what this looks like in here, in the landing page. This is what the player looks like inside of there. This is the size that the player defaults to from the podcatcher. And I just said, I always set my compression at 90%. No, it doesn't affect the pixel count. It does affect the size, though. Drastically affects the size. So I went from 100% of that original image, and I went down to half of the size of the image, the overall size of the image. I went down half that size, and and kept my compression at 90%. I use a JPEG unless I need to have Aries asked the question, have you found differences in image size between formats, PNG, JPEG, et cetera, and which do you have a preference? I pretty much download everything at JPEG unless I need to have a transparent background. Then you have to use a PNG format. And that's kind of standard. There's very little difference in the size between those, but I download everything as a JPEG. When you do a download here with Usign, it pretty much defaults to a JPEG, and so I prefer to do the JPEG because I'm going to have an entire. This is not going to have a transparent background on it, so there's no reason to have it any other way. I think it is supposed to be faster, but I don't notice an appreciable difference. All right, a couple of things that I want to address before we hit the end of the clock here. We talked about the image resizing. We talked about the compression. We talked about that you can help podcasters because podcasters are not doing visual things, and so there's a great visual opportunity for podcasters to be able to help them to do the stuff. I'm gonna create this is going to be my image, and I'm going to change this for every episode of the podcast. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to use this for every episode for the podcast. So this I will change. So this is what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to save this as use that. Let's do that. Now that will save it. I'm going to go back to the dashboard. And I have it right here. What I'm going to do, because I know eventually what's going to happen is it's going to get lost down in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to save it as a template. All right. Now when I select templates and I go to my templates, there it is. So I'm going to begin with this template every time. Everybody follow what I just did? I saved the image. It went to my dashboard. From the dashboard, I selected save as a template. I saved it as a template. Now I have this every time I'm ready to create a new podcast. I will want a new episode name in here. So when you select this, I'm gonna now use this. I'm gonna change this episode. I don't need to save this as a template, right? I just need to download this. So I'm going to download it. Then I'm going to compress it because it'll need to be compressed. But I'm going to download it. But I'm going to save it to my desktops, or I'm going to save it to the dashboard so you can see it. Make sure I didn't miss a step here. And it saved my template right here. Okay. Everybody follow that? Robin, you simply upload. So I can save this as a template and just use it over and over and over again. Robin, where did you see me download? You can't increase the size of an image without losing quality. You can't do that. You can't put more pixels in an image than it has originally. You can't make your original. Oh, when I click save as, it's saving it on my computer. It's saving it on, I'm sorry, it's saving it on my dashboard. Let's go back over here and you'll see. When I click to save, when I click this right here, this will rename this file. This will save it on the dashboard. This will save it on the dashboard with a new name. So you click the universal icon for save. The top one is save, and that will save it with the current name. When you select save as, that will save it on your dashboard with the new name. Okay. But Mike, you can't take an image. Let me see if I can illustrate this for you. Let me make this. Because this is already a small image. You can't take this image and make this image bigger without costing you without degrading the image quality, because you can't add more pixels than are currently there. Thank you, Pete. All right, any other questions about that? About anything that we've covered so far? So I want to talk about two more things before we get finished. To recap, we talked about how that you can use your presets over here, and that if you start with this medium right here and save your group, you can resize the group and come up with a really, really good rendition of what you started with. Yes, thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. One more thing. So we covered this. I gave you the link to this. I want to talk about this real quickly. This Pinterest pin size is really tiny. If you try to work with a 236 pixel wide pin size, it's going to be very, very small. So the one inside of Designer or a Usign is much bigger, and it's easier for you to operate. If you look at this, let me actually do this. If you take a pin size over here, I just wanted to point this out because this is kind of important. Where did I see Pinterest at? I can never find Pinterest on this list right here. Duh. In the pin, see this is 735. It's much bigger. It fits perfectly as a pin. But if I made that down to 256, it's half this size, and trying to do image placement on that, it's an absolute nightmare. All right. But the reason why I gave you this explanation over here from the template was, if you will use, because you're going to discover there's going to be some things that are just going to have a unique size. Like in this particular case, that's a unique size. We don't have anything that's 1400 by 1400. And the last thing I need to do is expect Usign to create a 1400 by 1400 template. I don't need to do that. What I should do instead is just save it as a template and fly from there. Right? Y'all with me? Any other questions? Okay, something came up. Let me do this. Something came up in the group about being able to put a white outline around the outside of a person's image. Okay, so I thought this is a great time for me to be able to give this explanation, because I think this will help you understand what we're doing here. You want to follow trending things. So let's talk about email marketing services. And I'm gonna park my cursor up here, because the implication in the group, and I understand what the guy was saying, and I totally agree with it. It's not the first time I've been asked the question, won't be the last. But there was a trend for a while where people were outlining people's images on their YouTube thumbnails. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I don't want to speak just out of here into the air. But it's always helpful to see what's trending and make sure that you are working to what's trending rather than what has been a previous trend. And when I do this and I click, I don't care what you put in here, and you scroll down through this, there's one. There's one, and it's pretty faint. This guy happens to offer all kinds of services, and he does do that. But out of 20, what did you see? And you can, this is always helpful. This is always helpful to you. In fact, do this. You want to talk about the people who are the most trending? People who are designers. And what do you see? Always helps to find out what's going on and make sure that you're tapping into the current trends and not trying to mimic something. And I looked at about 700 thumbnails last night. That's what you do on Thanksgiving night when you're suffering from a food coma. And I think I counted less than 10. Do you understand what I'm saying? The trend's kind of away from that now. And when I looked at it, it does depend a little bit on the genre, but that's the reason why I use design, because the trendy trenders are the people who work in that space, the graphic designers, and they're moving away from it. So my point is this: always kind of check out to see what's going on in the arena before you jump in and do that. And I did it on a couple of platforms, and the ones I'm finding were from a year, 2 years, and 3 years ago, not the ones from 3 months ago. It doesn't mean we won't do it. Understand that. But I think this is a good time for us to think, because what we'll do, we're at the end of 2020, and when we go back up here, this guy always does, like, this is trends in graphic design for 2020. We had a whole webinar on where we broke down the very things he talks about in his trends. This guy nails it every year. And we'll break this down in a couple of months as to, because he'll do another one for 2021. And we'll take a look at what's there. How's that going to work? What audiences is that going to work the best with? As Eric said earlier, what genres is it going to be the best in? What's it going to reflect the most in? But do you understand why that's valuable? It's like we talked about logos. Logos are becoming simpler all the time. We spent an entire Friday a year ago where we went through Pinterest and we looked at all of the Pinterest pins that caught your attention. And what was it about those pins that were valuable? And how do we mimic that in our design? All right, that's what I had on my agenda for today. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap up? Oh, that's a really good question. The outline of the letters right here. Let's use this again, because that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. That was Robin. Robin, right here, the way I did this is I put the text in, used this, and if you'll roll your mouse over the top of this, Let me select it again. You roll your mouse over the top of it. This is the effects tool on the right-hand toolbar, and I selected the border. And I just made kind of a fat border around the outside of that. Do you see that? Did you see that, Robin? So I start with the color of the letter. Turn this off. Start with the color of my lettering, and then I turned the border on and did that. Okay? If you want to create the letters that are only the outlines, it's really simple. So once you've created the lettering and then added the border, select no fill. And you can see that. And that's how you create that. Great question, though. Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate you asking that. Anything else before we wrap up? All right, you all have a wonderful, wonderful Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll be back here next Friday, and I will update you where we're at and how we're doing, and we will keep you up to speed on what's happening, okay? All right, be very careful, be very safe, and enjoy the weekend.